Larry Kudlow, CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the Weekend is here with me, and we've spent our time talking about Kansas and the puzzle of Greg Orman. Is he or is he not going to admit he's a liberal Democrat, and a very attractive liberal Democrat? He's a money manager. Good for him. He's been very prosperous. He has good relations on the street. He's Princeton 91. He's well educated. He's well married. He's from Kansas, but he won't say he's a Democrat, and that's not candor. However, we turn to Iowa, a neighboring state, a blue state, Larry. And Joni Ernst, who comes from behind the pack, beating Tea Party candidates in the primary, is now running, I won't say comfortably ahead, but I would say that Des Moines Register poll last Sunday was a shock to the Democrats, because this is not only a blue state, it's a progressive blue state that delivered to Barack Obama in 2008. And Tom Harkin, this is Tom Harkin's seat, and he recently had the Clintons there celebrating his departure from the Senate. But he's blessed, Bruce Braley, the Democratic candidate, who's a progressive, Obamacare voting, big government Democrat, and yet he's struggling against Joni Ernst. There's no one explanation but yours, Larry. What is it?
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. First of all, Joni Ernst is a very good candidate.
Yes.
She's a good retail politician. She sticks to message, stays on message. She's killing Braley on Obamacare. She's just killing him. And he's trying to squirm away, and she won't let him. And it's really very interesting. And by the way, nationally, the Republicans should not run away from Obamacare because it's so unpopular with its mandates and taxes. Anyway, that's one of her very key themes. Another thing that's going to help her, John, the incumbent governor is Republican Terry Brainerd. I believe this is his fifth election cycle. He's won 4. He's going to win this one. That helps the under ticket. Brainerd is very, very strong. And, don't forget Charles Grassley is a veteran Republican senator. So my point is, Iowa is a tough state. I think it's a purple state. And Joni Ernst is doing a good job boxing in this Braley guy. It's not over till it's over, but she's got about a 5-point lead.
They like that Des Moines poll, Larry, because it's a vigorous one.
Right.
I think the 538 crew likes it a lot.
Well, I think that's right. And she also took away a lot of Democratic ammunition. For example, Democrats are running on the so-called war against women. Well, that's awfully hard to do when you've got a strong woman like Joni Ernst. And, she's been reaching out, obviously, but she'll say you can sell contraceptives across the counter of a retail drugstore. That's a concession she's made, maybe from conservative orthodoxy, and that has also sort of stopped out all this Democrat war on women stuff. But she's getting killed by Obamacare. That's really the key point. And incidentally, if you want to go out west, John, in Colorado, it's the same story. Udall's getting killed by Cory Gardner on Obamacare.
I saw a stat today, and I wish I had it in front of me to confirm it, but that only 38, well, let's say a third of the Democratic candidates are speaking of Obamacare on the campaign trail. So though the Republicans seem reluctant to speak of it or to make it their lead, the Democrats are aware that it's not a help when they're running in against independents or against Republicans.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. And, of course, as you know better than most, this whole debacle in the Middle East is really damaged not only the president's standing, but it's circulating down through the Democratic Party. And so these candidates are suffering from that. And I guess Obama boxed himself in with another issue on intelligence and the 60 Minutes show. This hasn't even appeared yet in the polls, but I think the generic point, maybe this gets back to what you were saying earlier, it's time for a change. And in particular, it's time for change in the Senate because people want to checkmate the president. And I think that's a sort of subtle undertone to this whole thing. We need to checkmate the president, and so long as the GOP stays constructive, we're going to go with them.
All right. No, but I want to beat the drum a little bit for that Kudlow line about let's stand for something. Larry, they're looking very strong, so it's time to get in front of this parade. Get elected for something. We've given them 2 issues right now. The Republican senators I'm talking about. One is Obamacare. Speak for what the country is clearly saying, that this doesn't work. It's prohibition in a surgical coat. Also, that when it comes to the security question, which we We have evidence today that the president doesn't even attend all of his intelligence briefings. That was a fact that we got out of Washington today. The Republicans should make clear what their message is about the threat to the United States, the threat to New York. They're not, Larry. They're all standing back as if these are parochial issues and they don't want to nationalize the election. When we're told the president's approval ratings is the best indicator for how they're going to do on the election day.
Well, I've spent the better part of the last month campaigning on a national agenda, and I still think, see, if the GOP wins, John, what they're going to try to do is put bills on the president's desk. Let's take the Keystone Pipeline.
Right.
Put that on the president's desk and dare him to veto it. Another one would be corporate tax reform, I think. But Republicans aren't making it clear what these bills would be. In other words, they are talking about Keystone. The whole country wants business tax relief. GOP could be leaders and say, look, the people who will benefit the most from a more competitive business tax is the workers and the wage earners and the middle-class people. People want education reform, John. They're sick of the teachers' union. They want, free choice in education as well as free choice in health care. These are classic Republican reform agenda items. You just don't get the national message. Steve Moore and I were in Washington last week talking to various U.S.
Just so happens Steve Moore is finally crowded in. Let's let him speak for himself.
Good.
Steve Moore, the chief economist of the Heritage Foundation, joining us. Steve, do you want to pick one of those items for why the Republicans should campaign on them? Good evening, Steve.
I think the number one would be energy, John. I mean, I was in Pittsburgh and in Houston last week. Those two cities are absolutely booming. We could have 100 cities booming that way if we were to exploit our natural resources. The president's running around the country talking about, climate change when we've got an opportunity to create literally millions of jobs, become energy independent. I agree with Larry. That means we do the Keystone Pipeline. That means we do pipelines all over the country. It means we drill on federal lands. And it means we scuttle these ridiculous anti-carbon emission standards at the EPA, which are crippling our coal and oil industries.
That doesn't sound controversial, Larry, to make a straightforward energy statement for the Republican senators.
Well, energy reform is a great issue. Steve is right. I mean, you do hear senators talking about Keystone, but broad-based energy reform, such as opening federal lands, such as faster permitting for state lands, such as outer continental shelf, you just don't hear much of that. And gosh, I just think it's a pity. Republicans may win because they're not Obama.
Right.
All right? On the other hand, in politics, if you don't win on a clear mandate, it's very tough to govern.
Larry Kudlow, Steve Moore, I'm John Batchelor.